My ex used my savings to impress another guy while I paid our rents, so I took everything back and left her with nothing but regret. I'm a 28-year-old guy, and I thought I was finally building a life I could be proud of. For years, I'd been grinding, working late nights, budgeting every dollar, making sure my savings grew steadily. My little apartment was modest, nothing fancy, but it was mine. And I had a sense of control over my life that I'd never had before. I paid my rent on time, kept my bills organized, and even managed to tuck away a small cushion for emergencies. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stability. And after a decade of struggling to keep my head above water, stability felt like victory. Mia entered my life quietly, almost like she belonged there from the start. She had this way of making you feel like she was fully present, fully engaged, fully interested in you and your world. She laughed at my bad jokes, remembered little details I'd casually mentioned, and somehow made my apartment feel warmer, more alive. She said she was between jobs, trying to get back on her feet, and I felt this urge to help small things at first, paying for groceries she couldn't afford that week, splitting utility bills, letting her borrow some of my kitchen equipment. It didn't feel like a burden. It felt like I was helping someone I cared about. Like part of building a life together, we'd spend nights cooking together in my cramped kitchen. The smell of pasta sauce mingling with her perfume. The low hum of the fridge in the background. I felt a quiet pride in being able to support her, even in minor ways. There was a sense of partnership forming, like we were a team. Two people navigating adulthood together. I didn't see the cracks, or maybe I chose not to. She smiled at me over coffee in the morning, talked about her plans and ambitions, and I believed every word. I felt lucky, like someone finally saw me, appreciated my effort, and wanted to be a part of my life. I had no idea that my trust, my generosity, and even my hard-earned savings were about to be tested in ways I couldn't imagine. Even as I drifted off to sleep that night, I felt a quiet sense of optimism, unaware that everything I thought I knew about partnership was about to unravel. I started noticing the small things before I realized they were signs. Mia would come home late, claiming she'd been running errands or meeting a friend. But sometimes her stories didn't quite line up. A receipt left on the counter here. Quick glance at her phone, it didn't scream betrayal, but it planted tiny seeds of doubt that I tried to shake off. I kept asking myself if I was being paranoid, if I was reading too much into innocent behavior. But deep down, a little voice whispered that something wasn't right. At first, it was subtle. I'd noticed charges on our shared accounts that didn't match what she'd said. She'd talk about needing money for work supplies or friends in a bind, and I'd transfer a bit from my savings. Each time, she smiled warmly, hugged me, thanked me with a softness in her voice that made me feel like a hero. I told myself it was just a rough patch, that helping someone you care about sometimes meant sacrificing a little. And honestly, I liked feeling needed. It made me feel important in her life. It's like I was the one keeping us afloat. Our apartment, once quiet and orderly, started to feel a little tense. I'd hear her laughing softly on the phone in the living room while I did the dishes. Sometimes the conversation would end abruptly when I walked in. She'd wave it off with a casual, just catching up with a friend. But the way she said it, too cheerful, too practiced, made my stomach knot. Still, I told myself I was overthinking. Love, I reasoned, sometimes came with moments of uncertainty, even with the nagging doubt. There were moments of warmth that kept me tethered. Cooking dinner together, her hand brushing mine by accident, the way she leaned on my shoulder while we watched TV small. Intimate moments that felt like proof that we were a team. They made me forgive the inconsistencies, the little white lies, feelings of unease that were creeping in. I wanted to trust her. I really did. I told myself that being supportive was part of a healthy relationship, that helping her now would build a stronger foundation later. But I couldn't shake the feeling that these small cracks were only the beginning, and that what I didn't know yet was far worse than what I could see. It started with the receipts. I found them tucked under a pile of mail one morning. Fancy dinners, boutique shops, online orders that she'd never mentioned. At first I thought maybe I'd misread them, that she'd used her own money or borrowed from a friend, but as I dug deeper, it became impossible to ignore. The charges were real. coming from our shared accounts or directly from my savings. My chest tightened, my hands shook. I felt sick, like the floor beneath me had disappeared. How could someone I trusted so completely be living this double life right under my nose? When I asked her about it, she laughed softly, a light, almost musical sound that normally would have eased my worry. Oh, that. Just a few gifts for friends. You know me, I like making people happy. I blinked at her, confused and hurt, trying to piece together the story she was telling me versus the trail of evidence in my hands. But these are expensive. And some of them don't make sense, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. She shrugged, leaning against the kitchen counter like it was no big deal. I told you, it's nothing serious. Don't stress over it. Her tone was so casual. So practiced it was infuriating. I spent the night replaying everything, looking back at months of shared finances. Small loans I'd given her, the dinners I'd paid for, the groceries I'd covered. It was like seeing a movie of our life. But suddenly the narrative had changed. The hero, me, had been played the fool. I couldn't understand how I had been so blind. Every laugh, every intimate moment, every soft-spoken thank you, it all felt like a lie now. Or at least, a carefully curated mask to keep me from seeing the truth. But even as anger and betrayal bubbled under my skin, there was still a part of me clinging to the girl I thought I knew. Maybe she had a reason. Maybe there was an explanation I just couldn't see yet. I wanted to ask more, confront more, but my voice caught in my throat. I didn't know if I was afraid of her reaction or afraid of the truth. And that's when I realized I wasn't just helping someone in need anymore. My trust, my hard-earned money, my patience, it was being used. And I had no idea how deep this deception ran. By this point, I was carrying most of the weight in our little world. Rent, utilities, groceries, everything seemed to fall on me while Mia floated around, smiling, laughing, living as if nothing was wrong. At first, I told myself it was temporary. She was getting back on her feet, after all, and I liked feeling like I was supporting someone I cared about. But weeks turned into months, and the imbalance became impossible to ignore. I started noticing the subtle ways she avoided responsibility, leaving bills unopened, shrugging off reminders, making excuses about being stressed or forgetting again. One night, I was doing the dishes when I overheard her on the phone. Her voice was low, too careful, but there was a thrill in it. Yeah, it was amazing. He loved it, she said, giggling softly. My hands froze mid-swipe, water dripping from the sponge. I didn't recognize the excitement in her voice. It wasn't for me, not for the life we were supposedly building together. It was for someone else. My chest tightened, and a bitter taste settled in my mouth. I wanted to confront her right there, yell, demand the truth. But instead, I just let the sponge fall into the sink and backed away. Heart hammering. I started keeping closer track of our finances, trying to catch her in a lie or at least understand where all my money was going. Every small purchase she claimed was for friends or work events only added to the pile of inconsistencies. The apartment, once cozy and comforting, now felt suffocating. I'd sit on the couch at night, staring at the dimly lit room, and feel the creeping anxiety of realizing that my generosity might have been exploited. Yet despite the unease, there were moments of warmth that kept me holding on her hand, brushing mine accidentally in the kitchen. Her laughter when we watched old movies, the way she leaned against me when we cooked together. Those tiny moments kept me from acting on the anger building inside me. But deep down, I knew something had to change. The imbalance, the lies, the growing deception, they were all signs that our life together wasn't what I thought it was. I just didn't yet know how far it would go, or how much I was about to lose if I didn't wake up soon. I remember the exact moment everything changed, the moment I realized Mia had been using my money to impress someone else. I wasn't snooping intentionally. I was just cross-checking bills, trying to make sense of the growing gap in our accounts. That's when I saw it. Transfers, receipts, even a few messages that didn't belong to me. Expensive dinners, flowers, weekend getaways, none of it for me, none of it for friends, as she had claimed. My stomach dropped, my heart pounding so loud I thought she'd hear it through the walls. When I confronted her, I tried to keep my voice steady. "Mia, who is all this for?" I asked, my hands gripping the edge of the kitchen counter. She looked at me, her eyes wide for a second, but then she smiled, smooth and practiced, like she'd been rehearsing this moment. "It's nothing, really. Just someone I've been seeing. Don't make a big deal out of it." My chest tightened, and a bitter laugh escaped me. "You've been spending my savings to impress him?" I whispered, barely able to form the words. She leaned against the counter, casual, like she was untouchable. "It's not like you need that money," she said, tilting her head. "You're always working anyway. I just wanted to feel special too." The words hit me like a punch. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to shake her until she understood what she'd done. But instead, I sank onto the chair, numb, watching her like I was seeing her for the first time. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the betrayal, the way she'd manipulated me, played on my trust, and twisted my generosity into her personal playground. Every dinner I'd paid for, every grocery bill, every little loan I had given her had been a weapon, used to make her look charming to someone else. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the numbers, the messages, the proof of her deceit. My mind raced, torn between disbelief, anger, and heartbreak. I loved this woman, or at least I thought I did, but she had just shattered the foundation of everything I believed about us. And yet, as the initial shock faded, a cold clarity began to creep in. This wasn't just a mistake. This was deliberate. And I wasn't going to let it continue. After the initial shock wore off, I felt like I'd been punched in the gut and left gasping for air. The apartment, once a place of comfort, now felt suffocating. Every corner a reminder of how blind I'd been. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat properly. Every time I saw Mia laughing or scrolling through her phone, my chest tightened. I kept replaying the receipts, the messages, the transfers, every piece of evidence of her betrayal, and it made me feel small, foolish, and utterly powerless. I had thought I was building a life with someone I could trust completely. And now I realized that trust had been weaponized against me. I tried to confront her multiple times over the next few days. Each time she was calm, almost unnervingly so. "You're overreacting," she said once, leaning casually on the counter, her phone in hand. "I didn't mean to hurt you. Why are you making this into a bigger deal than it is?" Her words were like knives sharp, deliberate, and laced with guilt manipulation. I wanted to argue, to yell, to make her see the damage she had done, but I found myself frozen. My anger tangled up with disbelief and heartbreak. Friends noticed the change in me. I stopped answering texts, canceled plans, and even avoided family gatherings. I felt trapped in this emotional storm, isolated by shame and confusion. The man I thought I was steady, rational, confident was being chipped away by the woman I loved, and the betrayal I hadn't even imagined could be possible one night. Lying awake on the couch, I realized just how deep this went. Every cent I had saved, every sacrifice I had made, it's been funneled into someone else's life while I carried the burden of ours. The crushing weight of exhaustion and humiliation settled over me, heavier than any rent payment or financial obligation ever had. I felt like I had nothing left, not even my own sense of pride. And yet, somewhere beneath the anger, beneath the heartbreak, a cold clarity began to form. I wasn't going to remain a victim. I might feel powerless now, but I could take control. I could reclaim what was mine. And when I did, Mia was going to realize that she had underestimated the person she thought she could manipulate. I started paying closer attention, almost obsessively. Every transaction, every message, every casual excuse she gave, I cataloged it in my head like evidence in a case I was slowly building. I wasn't snooping anymore. I was preparing. There was something empowering in the meticulousness, a way to channel the anger and heartbreak into focus. I'd sit at my laptop late at night, going through bank statements, piecing together where my money had gone and noticing patterns I hadn't seen before. Each discovery made my blood boil, but it also sharpened my resolve. It wasn't just about money anymore, it was about control, about reclaiming the life I had built with my own hands. I remembered all the late nights working overtime, the sacrifices, the little victories I had celebrated alone, and realized how much of that had been drained to fuel her lies. I felt a mixture of rage and clarity, a cold, calculated edge to the emotions that had been raw and uncontrolled before. I knew exactly what I had to do: gather proof, solidify my position, and make sure she couldn't deny the truth, even as I meticulously documented her spending. I caught glimpses of her true self, moments I had missed before, texts with affectionate little flirts toward someone else. Receipts for dinners she had insisted were for work. Photos of her smiling at gifts that came directly from my Olivet painted a picture I could no longer ignore. I felt like I was uncovering a hidden layer of reality, one she had carefully crafted while I lived in good faith. Yet amidst the rage, there was a strange sense of empowerment. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I had a plan, like I could finally take back the narrative that had been hijacked. The betrayal was mine to respond to, mine to address on my terms. And that gave me a thrill that mixed strangely with the bitterness. I knew she thought she was untouchable, that her charm and manipulation had me trapped. She had no idea how methodical I could be when pushed to the edge. By the time I went to bed that night, my resolve had solidified. I wasn't going to let her walk away with my money, my trust, or my dignity. The stage was set, and when the confrontation came, I would be ready. The confrontation wasn't sudden. I had been planning it in my head for days, rehearsing the words, the tone, the evidence I would present. I remember standing in the living room, the dim light from the lamp casting long shadows across the apartment, my chest tight with a mix of anger and anticipation. Mia was lounging on the couch, scrolling on her phone, completely unaware of the storm that was about to hit. For the first time in weeks, I felt calm, almost eerily so. The raw panic and despair that had haunted me were replaced with a cold, deliberate focus. "I know everything," I said quietly, letting the words hang in the air. Her head snapped up, eyes wide, the casual smile faltering for the first time. "What are you talking about?" she asked, voice trembling slightly, a faint edge of defensiveness creeping in. I placed the receipts, bank statements, and screenshots on the coffee table, one by one. Each document, each transaction, told the story she had tried so desperately to hide. Her composure started to crack as I walked her through the months of deception. These dinners, these gifts, all paid for with my money. This isn't about generosity anymore. This is about using me, I said, my voice steady, but the heat of betrayal bleeding through. She opened her mouth, flustered, stammering, I can explain. It wasn't like that, but I held up a hand. "No, I'm done listening to explanations. The truth is here." She sank back into the couch, eyes darting between me and the mountain of proof, panic rising. "You can't just," she began, but I cut her off, a mix of calm authority and quiet fury in my voice. I realized then that the balance of power had shifted. For weeks I had felt trapped, powerless, humiliated. Now I was in control. The person who had manipulated, lied, spent my savings without consequence was suddenly exposed, vulnerable, on the defensive. I watched as the first flickers of fear and regret crossed her face. And in that moment I understood that confrontation wasn't just about reclaiming money, it was about reclaiming myself. But even as I felt that surge of control, I knew this was just the beginning. After the confrontation, a heavy silence settled over the apartment. But it wasn't pessit. It was tense, brittle, like walking on shards of glass. Mia sat on the couch, her eyes wide, hands trembling slightly, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her, almost. But then, I remembered every lie, every transaction, every night I had spent carrying the weight of our life, while she spent my money elsewhere. The anger and betrayal that had been simmering now boiled over into a mix of hurt and disbelief. I had never felt so small, so foolish, so completely blindsided. She tried to manipulate me again, softening her voice, leaning toward me with what I recognized as her charm mode. "Please, you're overreacting. Can't we just talk about this?" she whispered, her tone layered with false innocence. I felt my stomach twist. I had been through weeks of gaslighting, excuses, and empty apologies, And now I was expected to listen to more. I shook my head, feeling the exhaustion settle deep into my bones. "No," I said finally, voice low and steady. "I've listened. I've been patient. I've let you manipulate and lie to me for months. This ends now." That night, I sat alone on the couch, staring at the city lights outside my window. My head pounded, my chest ached, and I realized how completely this had drained me, not just financially, but emotionally. Every ounce of trust, every moment of belief in us, had been twisted into a tool for her amusement and advantage. I felt like I had hit rock bottom, powerless, betrayed, humiliated, and utterly exhausted. The life I thought I was building had been hijacked by someone I loved and trusted completely. But beneath the despair, beneath the crushing weight of betrayal, a spark of clarity began to flicker. I realized that while she had taken my money and my trust, she hadn't taken my sense of self. I still had my mind, my will, my ability to act. And I knew that if I wanted justice, if I wanted to reclaim control, I couldn't let the hurt dictate my actions. I had to be deliberate, calculated, and relentless. As I closed my eyes that night, the anger was still simmering, but it had transformed. The path forward was clear. I was going to take back everything she had taken from me. And when I did, she would understand exactly what betrayal cost. The next few days were a whirlwind of careful planning. I wasn't going to let emotion drive me this time. The raw hurt and betrayal had been transformed into a precise, methodical resolve. I went through every account, every bill, every shared expense, and made a list every dollar she had spent from my savings. Every possession she had treated as her own. Everything I had supported that had been diverted for her benefit. It was time to reclaim what was mine, and I wanted to do it in a way that left no room for excuses, no wiggle room for denial. When I finally told her, I kept my voice calm. "Everything you took, every cent, every advantage, you're giving it back," I said, placing the evidence on the table. Her initial reaction was shock, then panic, then the first hints of fear. I could see it in her eyes, the realization that the control she thought she had over me had evaporated. "You can't do that. That's mine," she cried, her voice rising, trembling with desperation. I didn't flinch. I let her words wash over me, detached, collected. The tables had turned. I went through our shared accounts, canceled automatic payments, and reversed transfers where I could. Items she thought were hers were removed from our apartment or reclaimed. Through receipts and evidence I had carefully collected. Every step felt like reclaiming not just money, but my dignity, my autonomy, the control she had stolen from me. The thrill of empowerment mingled with the satisfaction of knowing that she could no longer hide behind her charm or manipulate me with guilt. By the end of the week, she was left with nothing she had gained from minnow money, no possessions, no leverage. The panic on her face when she realized she couldn't talk her way out of this was almost poetic. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The look in her eyes said everything. The betrayal, the lies, the manipulation, it had all been laid bare. She had lost. As I walked away from the apartment that night, a strange calm settled over me. For the first time in months, I felt in control again. The storm of anger, betrayal, and heartbreak was still there, but it had transformed into clarity, focus, and, most importantly, empowerment. I had taken back what was mine. The days after reclaiming everything were surreal. The apartment felt lighter, the air clearer, as if the weight of her lies had physically lifted from my shoulders. Mia was still there for a few days, lingering, trying to plead, to apologize, to manipulate one last time, but I didn't respond. Her frantic texts went unanswered. Her attempts to guilt me evaporated into silence. For the first time, I could breathe without the constant tension, without feeling like I was walking on eggshells around someone I had trusted completely. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about reclaiming my life. I realized how much I had been sacrificing, how much emotional labor I had poured into someone who never deserved it. Every dinner I paid for, every grocery run I covered, every little favor I had done, it had been taken for granted. And now, with the balance restored, I felt a surge of vindication, a quiet satisfaction that I hadn't felt in months. There was no need to gloat. The truth spoke for itself. I started rebuilding routines for myself, small things at first. I reorganized my finances, separating every account, securing my savings, setting boundaries I should have had from the start. I even reconnected with friends I had been avoiding, those I had shut out while spiraling through disbelief and heartbreak. For the first time, I felt like myself again, not the exhausted, manipulated version I had become, but the man who had built a life worth protecting. The best part? Watching her face as she realized she couldn't manipulate, guilt, or charm me anymore. The panic, the desperation, the recognition that she had lost. It was quiet, almost imperceptible, but it was there. She had underestimated me, underestimated what it meant to take someone's betrayal personally and respond with precision. By the end of that week, I understood something important. Betrayal can break you, but it can also sharpen you. I had been hurt, yes, but I had also learned my own strength, my boundaries, and the power of standing firm. Mia had left with nothing, but I had gained something far more valuable: control, dignity, and clarity. And for the first time in months, I felt whole again. Weeks later, the apartment felt completely mine again, quiet, orderly, and free of the tension that had suffocated me for months. I'd rebuilt routines, secured my finances, and reclaimed not just what she had taken, but my sense of self. Each morning, I woke up with clarity, a calm focus, knowing I was no longer carrying the weight of her lies or the exhaustion of her manipulation. The freedom was intoxicating, but more than that, it was empowering. I had survived betrayal, exposure, and humiliation and come out stronger. I never sought revenge in a dramatic sense. No public confrontation or spectacle. The revenge had been methodical, controlled, precise. Every cent reclaimed, every boundary enforced, every manipulation shut down. Those were my victories. And in a quiet, almost ironic twist, Mia eventually reached out. Hesitant texts full of excuses and apologies, hoping to reconnect or soften the blow she had inflicted. I read them once, felt a flicker of old emotion, then deleted them. She had her moment, but I had mine, and mine was worth infinitely more. I reflected on the lessons learned, the boundaries I had ignored, and the trust I had given too freely. I realized that generosity and love are not weaknesses, but blind trust without accountability can be devastating. I had been patient, empathetic, and caring, but I had also learned when to draw the line, when to act, and when to reclaim what is yours without hesitation. That understanding was the most valuable thing I walked away with. In the end, I didn't just take back my savings or my dignity. I took back my power. I rebuilt my life on my own terms, free from deceit, free from manipulation, and free from the weight of someone else's selfishness. I had survived betrayal, and in doing so, I had discovered my own strength. As I look back now, I realize the irony. I lost nothing of true value. Everything she tried to take was reclaimed, but the real victory was internal peace, clarity, and empowerment. I didn't just walk away with my life intact. I walked away with something far greater, a sense of invulnerability, knowing that no one could take my worth again. And that finally felt like freedom.